Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library, and today I have another great guest on, and it's always a pleasure to highlight the entrepreneurs and the civic leaders and the business leaders that are doing great work here in my city, Charlotte. So welcome to the show, Christine Edwards.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, before we jump into the work that you're doing with Amplify Consulting and just the host of the things that you got going on, tell us a little bit about your background before you started all those.
Absolutely. I'm probably Charlotte's biggest cheerleader. I grew up here in the Queen City. I was born in Norfolk, Virginia. So, I'm not a Charlotte native, but I grew up here. My mom, my brother, and I moved down to Charlotte when I was in elementary school. My brother and I were in elementary school. And I come from a background of hardworking people, like so many Black Americans do. My dad is a Navy man. He retired from the Navy. My mother is a full career nurse, registered nurse, and she still works for one of the major hospitals here in Charlotte. And so she raised me and my brother just to know that we should work hard and work hard to earn everything that we have now. And we're so grateful for it. So I grew up here in Charlotte, high school here, but one of the first things I realized was that, we always had to go to other neighborhoods in order to go shopping, grocery shopping, school shopping, things like that. But I noticed that we didn't necessarily have what we needed in my neighborhood in East Charlotte when we first moved here. And so I started to sort of awaken as one of those civic observers. And so, I always just wonder like how things really worked behind the scenes as far as, urban, management, who is really running the stuff behind the scenes. So, that was kind of my upbringing, just being a really curious child and being told to be a hard worker. And so I went to school for sociology, African American studies, because again, I was just curious about, how things work and how people work. Um, Graduated in 2010. I am a quintessential millennial, proud millennial. Graduated, unfortunately, at the height of our last recession. And so I was really unsure of what to do next. And so instead of going into social work right out of undergrad, I ended up moving back home to Charlotte and I finished my MPA, my Master's of Public Administration, in 2013 with the goal to someday be a city manager. I was super lucky to get a job with the City of Charlotte manager's office in 2012. Where I helped out with the DNC, the Democratic National Convention in 2012, and just watched our city grow and blossom into the city that it is today. So a lot has changed in the last decade here in Charlotte. And so I'm just really happy to have been a part of it.
Awesome. And as you can see, for those that are watching and listening, this is why I said, someone who is a great civic leader and not only just focus on building her own agendas, but also really helping fuel the city. So one of the questions that it came up as you were talking through that was, as you start to understand, the behind the scenes of how things work in a city, because I think that's something that a lot of people either take for granted or don't really understand. Were there things that surprised you of how the behind the scenes work in the city?
That's a good question. Um, I think the thing that surprised me most was the level of transparency that is required of cities and local governments. They're required to make these meetings public, so you can go in and sit in on these city council meetings, but there's really only a certain level of access that they provide the public. You can go in and look at how the budget is being allocated, but not everybody speaks that language. And so that was just one of the things that was really surprising. As I worked as a government employee, I was privy to all this stuff because it was like, look, this is where you can come to the meeting, ask questions, write a letter to us. We are required to respond to you, but a lot of people don't think that they're allowed to do that. And so that's one of the things that I try to advocate for, is to let people know you can submit a public records request. You can find out why the intersection continues to see accidents, for example. I think one of the things also that was super surprising was that construction jobs, like for example, sidewalk construction and infrastructure jobs, they're on a first come, first serve basis. And there's a long, long list of requests for sidewalks, all of these incomplete sidewalks. But the other thing that I noticed was that, I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So
Yep.
if you make enough noise, then they will listen to you if you make enough noise. And so the neighborhoods that have the capacity to make noise are the ones that have the time, the ones that speak the language, the ones that have the money to make the noise. And so that's why a lot of our neighborhoods that are nicer in terms of infrastructure are also the neighborhoods that, you know, get their stuff answered a lot faster than these other neighborhoods that don't have the pretty sidewalks and crosswalks and things like that.
Wow, that is interesting to know. So, I mean, tell us a little bit about, kind of as you've navigated, the different opportunities. I mean, with, Amplify Consulting, what really spurred that and what is that about?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because I love telling this story. So the reason that I started Amplify and where the idea came was, I guess it was in 2016, I had the idea for it, but I didn't really know how to implement. And this story has a couple of different parts. So I applied for a grant, excuse me, I think it was back in 2016. It was either 2016 or 2017. I applied for the grant with the Knight Foundation, the Emerging City Champions Challenge, and I didn't get it. And the idea for Amplify, it was a series of events, like community events that I was going to come and invite people to so that they could learn how to get involved. And it just didn't really resonate because the idea, we weren't there yet as a city, as a community. And so I didn't win the grant competition. So I was super bummed. So then in 2017, I was working my full-time job. I was with Mecklenburg County at the time. And I went out to a neighborhood meeting. So a part of my job as a community relations coordinator was to go to these neighborhood meetings and just to, check in on people and say, hey, how's it going? Are there any services we can give you access to? And so at that meeting, I got a chance to meet the HOA leader. And she's this older lady who had lived in her neighborhood, owned her home for over 20 years. And the neighborhood was truly a changing neighborhood. It was close to Uptown. And it was right across the street from a light rail station being built. And so she said, Christine, can you take a look at this letter? And the letter was opened. It was kind of a wrinkled letter. And I said, sure, I can take a look at it. And so I looked at the letter and it looked like one of those zoning letters where it's like a map and a symbol and some jargon. And I wasn't sure what it was. I said, wow, I'm sorry, I don't really know what this means. Let me take it back to my colleagues and see what it means. And so I took it back to work and they said that it's actually a zoning letter. It's a notice that her parcel, the parcel of land right next to her home, would be rezoned to multifamily. And so that meant that there would be a multi-floor apartment building built right behind her house. Could you imagine just having your neighborhood changed, just like that? And at that point, there was nothing that we could do because communities are going to grow. Communities are going to change. But with Amplify, we help communities grow with dignity. And so, I kind of was beating myself up like, I have a master's degree. Why couldn't I understand that zoning letter? Why couldn't I have helped her before it got to this point? Or at least just let her know what was coming down the pipe. And so that really encouraged me again when the grant challenge came back up in 2018. I said, you know what? I'm going to apply again under the brand Amplify, but it's going to have a new mission. So it wasn't just a community event series. It was actually a boxed toolkit that had resources from the city government, county government, nonprofits, school board, some things that were donated. We even got the Latin American Coalition to translate some of our materials to Spanish. And so we were really happy about that. And so we won the grant. It was a $5,000 grant. And we did that project. It was a 1-year fellowship and project. So I said, man, this is awesome. I was able to deploy these toolkits. We deployed the toolkits through community festivals. We got some surveys, answered what people liked about the toolkits, what they didn't like about the toolkits. And I had enough money. So I created a website and I went ahead and got my LLC because I really realized that this was the work that I was meant to do.
Awesome. Awesome. Man, that is exciting. I mean, to really be able to, start an organization and to be so connected to, like that fundamental reason as to what spurred it on. So I think that is amazing. So when you talk about, Amplify Consulting, what are the types of services or the types of consulting projects outside of, the helping with the zoning? What is it that you guys do?
We do direct consulting for municipalities, cities, towns. And what we do is we host focus groups on their behalf, feedback sessions, workshop sessions for their community development projects. It doesn't always have to be a community development where there's housing being built. We have also, for example, we have worked on transportation projects where our transportation department is redoing, or they're coming up with a 5-year plan. And so I will conduct a focus group in order to get in front of diverse populations. That's one example. Another example is with the public utility, public water, right? And so anything that's public facing, Amplify is going to be the liaison. Amplify is going to help you grow and help you grow your project, but we're going to help you get in front of those diverse audiences and conduct those meetings on your behalf. So with the utility, with the water utility, we held employee stakeholder groups and we did one-on-one interviews with the employees. And so that led to them creating their 5-year employee strategic plan. Another awesome example, and we're entering into a whole new world of engagement, especially because of this virtual world that we're living in. This project I was so excited to be a part of. And this was actually my first project as a prime consultant. And a prime consultant is 100% responsible for the deliverable. My other projects, I was a sub, right? A sub consultant is subbed out from the prime, and they are just doing a small portion of the project. But this project with the city of Asheville, it was called Reimagining Public Safety for the city of Asheville. And that's just another way to say they were defunding the police. And so this is a controversial topic. I'm sure you've heard about it, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this idea of defunding the police is kind of a controversial topic, and the city of Asheville was very brave. The city of Asheville was very forward thinking because they listened to the activist community and they said, you know what we're not going to do is defund our police department. But what we will do is provide a venue for feedback and provide a venue for engagement so we can listen to people and explore what public safety could look like if we reimagined it. And so they actually asked people, what does safety mean to you? So they put out an RFP, which is a request for proposal. My team submitted a proposal response and we won. We won the project and we conducted 6 virtual listening sessions for Asheville residents. And we conducted 2 in-person sessions. This is all during COVID. And we did that within the span of 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And so this was like a quick fire project, but it was just so awesome to be a part of it. And the best part of this, even though, they're going to get some pushback because, again, that defunding topic is super touchy. And the police are a very strong sort of brotherhood, they call themselves. And so it's really hard to penetrate into that. And so when it comes to community engagement, the community is fearful. The community is fearful of having that conversation with their city because they don't think they're going to listen to them. But the best part of this is that the Asheville City Council actually decided to move 3% of the police budget from police operations to other parts of the city in order to support community outreach in terms of public safety.
Wow. I mean, that definitely sounds like a lot of work in a short period of time and a very impactful topic. I mean, to be able to get the actual citizenry to give their feedback and to incorporate that into, because I do think, yeah, sometimes some people feel like, their voice isn't being heard or their feedback isn't being considered, but that's always great to see that. Now, where can people find you online, or your website, or on social media to follow the things that Amplify is up to?
So you can find us, our website is amplifycharlotte.com. That's Amplify Charlotte spelt out. And then you can find us on Instagram at AmplifyCLT. We're also on Facebook at AmplifyCLT. We're on Twitter as well. We have Amplify_CLT on Twitter. Real quick note about the Asheville project. I know I said it was 3% of the police budget. I just want folks to know that is nearly $800,000.
Gotcha.
Okay. That's a lot of money that they moved from the police budget in order to support public safety in other ways.
Wow, that is a very impactful move. Now, one of the things that you mentioned earlier that I wanted to revisit, you mentioned about, early on a future goal was eventually becoming a city manager. Now that you think about, your experience and the things that you've had exposure to, what does the future look like for Christine Edwards?
Oh boy. I love that question because, man, like I said, I'm a millennial and we're living in a brand new world right now. And I left my job. I am a full-time entrepreneur now. So the future looks different than it did before. I think when I was in quote unquote corporate, when I was in public service, I think the goal definitely was to become a city manager. And I definitely think that's still on the table for me. I would go into interviews and say, I want to be city manager by 40. And I think that ambition as a Black woman, I feel like that ambition can work for you and it can work against you at sometimes. I'm just being real. And but I get really inspired when I see women like Deborah Campbell, when I see women like Teresa Wilson, the city manager of Columbia, South Carolina. I get really inspired when I see Black women leaders. So I definitely think that's still an option for me on the table. However, right now with Amplify, I love being a CEO. I love being the visionary, and it's so fun to be able to do this revolutionary work. And I think that the next steps for Amplify is actually, we're creating a training academy right now. And I'd like to talk about that a little bit, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So we're creating a training academy and it's launching in November 2020. I can't say too much about it, but the training academy is to help other consultants who do similar work that I do, professional services consultants that do leadership training. Maybe they do HR training, healthcare training, or maybe you are janitorial, landscaping, maybe even catering. What I want to do is help them get enterprise ready. I want them to gain access to these public contracts too. Okay, these public sector contracts, they're there for you, and you need to get certified as an MBE, and you need to get certified as a WBE and an SBE. Those are all minority certifications that are free for you to find out about. But our training academy is going to be called the Contract Academy, and it's launching in November. And so I'm excited to tell you guys more about that.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, as more information comes out about that, where will they be able to find that information?
We actually have a website. There's just a landing page right now. It's called thecontractacademy.com.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, before we wrap up, one question that I like to ask every guest that comes on is, when you think about, your experience and you think about your journey and, where you are now and where you want to go in the future, what's two pieces of advice that you would share with other business owners?
Urgency. Work with a sense of urgency. I'm not saying move too quick. Now, don't get ahead of yourself. But if you have an idea, don't sit on it. You got to move with a sense of urgency. And then the second thing is relationships matter. Relationships matter a lot more than you think. So treat people well, because you never know what people are going through, and you never know where that could lead you.
Awesome. Well, Christine, thank you so much for coming on the Business Talk Library, telling us a little bit about your story, sharing your wisdom and your insight, and telling us about the awesome things going on with your businesses and the new project that's coming in November. So we'll definitely keep an eye out to watch all the great things that are coming from Christine Edwards. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like our content, be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want to see more of our exclusive content, you can subscribe and become a member on patreon.com/Business Talk Library. Hey, the Business Talk Library is the place where business makes sense.